Welcome to Podcast, the Business of Dentistry podcast, brought to you by Practice Plan. Podcast delivers the best business advice, real-life stories, and practical hints and tips to make your practice a more profitable and sustainable business. And now, here's your host.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest edition of the In the Loop podcast with me, Nigel Jones. I'm one of the directors of the Practice Plan group of companies, and as regular listeners will know, I really enjoy these podcasts as it gives me a chance to explore topics of interest to do with the world of UK dentistry with some very knowledgeable and well-informed people. And today is absolutely no exception, as I'm delighted to be joined by Stephen Henderson. Hello, Stephen.
Hi, Nigel. It's lovely to be with you today.
Well, I'm so grateful to you for spending some time with us. What we would like to do just over the next sort of like 15 minutes ish is just explore what's going on in the world of regulation in dentistry and matters relating to the GDC in particular. And I just wonder then, for people that are less familiar with you, and I'm sure that there are relatively few of those, if I'm honest with you, but if there is anyone that isn't quite clear on your background, I wonder if you could just give us a quick canter through your background.
Sure. I qualified in the mid-80s and spent 5 years full-time and then 10 years part-time in hospital practice. And while I was part-time in practice, I was in general practice in Oxford. And in 2000, I joined Dental Protection as a part-time advisor. And in 2007, I became a full-time advisor, but I still kept on the practice one day a fortnight. I'm a specialist in oral surgery, so it was a referral practice, which was ideally suited to fortnightly sessions. In 2018, I moved from Dental Protection to MDDUS and was the head of the dental team there for 3 years, and I left them in the summer of 2023. And I've been working as an independent dental advisor really for the last year or so. And I help dentists who are struggling to get help from their indemnity provider. I help them with, I do some writing, presenting, mixture of things. I mean, as you said, Nigel, you've seen my stuff on GDP UK. I do a kind of monthly blog there, which is fascinating to do. And at the moment, I do a little bit of consultancy with AllMed Pro, helping their clients deal with complaints. So, working as much as or as little as I can get. So it's nice.
Well, I know your sort of presentations and your articles and like blogs on GDP UK, they're all very, very well appreciated, and I can see why, because you know your stuff and you articulated it extremely well. So with that in mind, we're obviously under a Labour government now, and they seem to be taking a slightly different approach to regulation. So you get this sense that change is in the air. And what's your take on the current situation with the regulation of the dental profession in the UK?
Okay. It's plain that the Department of Health, who really will be the driver of any change in regulatory law, are interested in dealing with the big professions. The GMC and the Nursing and Midwifery Council are really at the front of the queue for reform of their acts. The GDC is relatively far back in the queue, and that's quite well known within the GDC that they're unlikely to be on. They're unlikely to get anything done in this Parliament because the length of time it takes to deal with the reform of the Dentist Act. There are some reforms that need to be done. Some changes need to be made, and one big one for me would be to look at corporates and to see if the GDC can regulate corporates rather than just dealing with individuals. I think the fitness to practice procedure needs to be tidied up a bit, but the basic process isn't going to change even if the Dentist Act is reformed.
Okay. If I take that first one, the corporates, and it's very interesting you should mention that, because I think it was only this morning that I was reading an article about the veterinary world and the concerns that of the pressures being put on vets to generate income. What do you see as the main things that people need to think about if they're approaching the regulation of the corporates?
I think I think it's that point is important, that corporate dentistry is delivered for the benefit of the public as well as the shareholders, obviously, but that the council can control how the corporate acts as opposed to how the clinical director acts or the individual practitioners within a corporate act. I see it a lot in helping people with complaints and talking to dentists. The pressures they get from managers to upsell or to deliver a certain volume of UDAs in England and Wales is significant, particularly as invariably it's the younger practitioners, it's practitioners who have perhaps come to UK to work and are not so familiar with NHS. Managers seem to have a disproportionate influence, and people are fearful of losing their jobs, so they do what the manager asks, and that may be contrary to the ethical principles that the GDC wants us to operate under. So I think it would be, I'm sure that's right, looking in the veterinary world, looking at the opticians world, looking at the world of pharmacy, there are going to be lots of examples of how you can regulate corporates. And by thinking, broader and looking at other examples, the GDC could sensibly develop a system that works for the public, because that's really what it's about. They've got to work to protect the public.
Yeah, and I think that's because for me it's quite interesting, all of this, because I remember some years ago, and I'm sure you'll remember the quote from the Federation of London LDCs, where it spoke about needing to achieve the gold standards of the GDC on the tin-plated NHS budget that was made available. So there's this sort of sense of tension between the activity requirements of an NHS contract in England and Wales again, and achieving the standards set by the GDC and adhering to the ethical principles you were just mentioning. If you then throw into the midst of that a corporate entity as well that is potentially, look at this day and age with rising costs and lack of workforce availability that's driving up the cost of clinicians. It's quite a challenging economic environment for a corporate. So that managing that tension between the standards and the activity and income generation must be quite tough.
Absolutely, I think it's a big challenge for anyone who owns a practice, whether you're an individual, very small practice, or whether you're a corporate the size of my dentist or Portman or whatever. Those are big ventures with huge budgets, and inevitably they want to make them as profitable as they can do, and certainly not loss-making. And so I can understand the pressures to encourage patients to have upsell cosmetic dentistry, upsell aligner treatments, whatever. It's how do you manage that tension and yet still maintain an ethical approach? I'm not suggesting it's easy, at all. And I have sympathy with the corporates because they're such big organizations as to how on earth do they recruit, retain, and motivate their teams. Plainly, they're very good at it because quite a lot of dentists are quite happy working for the same corporate for a long time. It doesn't matter. They're happy there. It's, you know, maybe it's a function of managing individual managers. I don't know. Time will tell. And it, you know, you have to look at. They'd have to look in deeply at patterns of complaints and feedback to see, you know, like a root cause analysis, see what the problem is. But
Yeah.
you know, I don't suppose many of these really come to the attention of the local NHS team. It's more, unless patients start complaining through the NHS schemes, they're not going to find out about it too much. And maybe I have a different view because I only ever see the bad news stories. Nobody rings me to say they've had a good day.
Yeah.
No. So I recognise that I see a very skewed type of situation, really. So compared to, you know, the dental advisor within an NHS team, or you know, or the inspectors who are seeing good practice all the time. Maybe I'm a bit inevitably see the doom and gloom, which is, it's a shame, but it also is very real. And you know, if you know, it's like anything. If you can fix the small problems before they get big, there'll be fewer big problems.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, actually, you touched on something in your opening comments there, which sort of made me think about overseas dentists. We know we've got a workforce crisis at the moment, so there's things like the NHS long-term workforce plan, but I think that seems to have some flaws in its methodology and calculations. But even if it went according to plan, it's still going to be well into the next decade before it actually has a major impact. So then that leaves us looking, and that's even if it's skill mix or dentists, you know, if it's hygienist, therapists, but so the overseas dentist seems to be the answer that a lot of people are looking towards. But then the GDC, I guess, again, have got that challenge between, okay, it would be helpful to have more workforce, but you can't, you know, risk standards in the process of trying to bring people over.
Yeah. The GDC's job is very simple. It's to ensure that anyone joining the register is good to go, that they'll be a safe beginner, or whatever the current phrase is now, but they've had an appropriate education and they're competent to do it. In the UK, that's done by following the university curriculum, passing the exam, and then you register, followed by foundation training. International students either come from Europe or have to complete the overseas registration exam. Now, the overseas registration exam is very good for testing competencies, but it doesn't help anyone understand how the NHS operates. So at the moment, the GDC can register as many overseas dentists as it likes who are competent to get on the register, but they won't get a performer number until they've satisfied NHS England that not only are they competent in delivering dentistry, but they're also competent in understanding NHS administration and NHS processes and NHS contracts and, you know, all of that stuff. So as Ian Brack, the former chief exec at the GDC, said, look, that's not our problem. Our problem is to register dentists and dental care professionals, and that's what we do. The break often is how quickly can you get somebody onto a performers list? And that takes, by assessment, can take 6 weeks, can take a year, could take longer before somebody's given a performer number. So yes, you can register international dentists, but they won't immediately be available to deliver NHS care because they have to satisfy the NHS as well. You know, with all the reform of NHS England, or the execution of NHS England, perhaps, I'm not sure how that's going to wash down into the impact of that into local teams. You know, the commissioning groups and the commissioning teams, you know, managing the performers list, that function has to continue. It'll just be called something else. It'll be managed by somebody else. Maybe there's an opportunity to look at how rigorous that performers list process is. I don't know. What I suspect don't want to do is give performers list numbers out without validating people's competencies.
Yes, it seems with, and I know these can be isolated cases that you kind of get out of proportion, but there seem to have been some high-profile instances when there's been a lack of clarity here about the NHS contractual arrangements, let alone if you're coming from internationally into the.
Well, I'm certain that quite a lot of dentists don't really understand how the nuances of how it works. But that's manageable with education and support. I mean, for example, let's think about the complaints procedure. When a complaint comes to a practice, the number of times I see a complaint coming into the practice where the performer is expected to deal with it beginning, middle, end, and without involving the provider, there's too many times. The NHS complaints procedure requires the provider to deal with the complaint. Now, that might mean they can delegate the response to the associate that's done the treatment, but they still have to adopt that response as a practice response. Otherwise, it's not meeting the regulations strictly. But so many people are operating pre-2006 or pre-2009, the current complaints procedure. You know, it tells me that people don't spot that there's been a change. And they, you know, I write to them and say, well, you've got to give this to the provider. The provider's got to deal with all this stuff about the receptionist was rude to me, or I was kept waiting and nobody told me, you know, or my messages weren't passed on. The associate that's nothing to do with the associate. The associate can comment on the clinical dentistry, but all the admin stuff, that's the provider to deal with. So they need a combined response. For example, that's just a simple example of people not really keeping up to date with how things have changed. I mean, that's nearly, you know, it's not far off 10 years ago. Well, more than 10 years, not far off 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So, you know, the dental profession does take a while to catch on sometimes. And the difficulty is to go back to what it was when they started. You know?
Yeah. No, absolutely. The other area that you mentioned in your very opening comments, Stephen, was around fitness to practice, and that attracts an awful lot of attention, most of it negative from within the profession. What's your take on the current state of play there?
I mean, I'll start with the positive. by the time a practitioner is in front of the fitness to practice panel, the fitness to practice panel deals with them pretty fairly, pretty robustly, and pretty consistently. So if I look at a set of allegations for a hearing, I think myself and all my colleagues who are experienced in this would have a pretty good idea what the outcome's likely to be if the facts are proved. The clue that they're getting it right most of the time is there are very few registrant appeals challenging decisions of the Professional Conduct Committee, and there are very few challenges by the regulator for the regulators, the Professional Standards Authority. So the PSA sees every fitness to practice decision and has to decide whether it's unduly lenient or not, or under prosecuted. There are very few challenges by the PSA to the GDC's decisions. So I think the Professional Conduct Committee is getting it right. The Interim Orders Committee, which is the urgent hearing, has a very simple job. It has to do a risk assessment of the facts as they are on that date. So if somebody's been arrested and charged with a sexual offence, then the job of the Interim Orders Committee is principally to protect the public. So again, they're pretty consistent. You can fairly accurately predict what they're going to do because there's a lot of history there. You can see, and they're consistent, so that's not a problem. It's pretty scary for the practitioner, but they generally get that right as well. The problems come. Oh, there's another bit of good news. The GDC's just introduced a new way of looking at complaints that come in the front door. And those complaints, if it's a single patient about a single incident and you've no history, they put you on a fast track to find out whether there's anything in it or not. And a lot of those cases are being closed before a proper investigation gets going. So those are some positives. The big negative is the disgraceful amount of time it is taking to process a complaint through an investigation to a hearing. So if the GDC decides to investigate a case, it will ask for the records, it will get a dentist to look at the records and give a report. That report will be given to the dentist or DCP, and some allegations are raised. The dentist is asked to put a letter in, and their defence organisation helps them with that. That process is taking anything up to a year or 2 years to get to that point. Once the letter is done, that process is taking another year to get to the case examiners. So you're already into 18 months, 2 years, 2.5 years before the first decision is made. And that's a complete disgrace. Given that all that's needed when you've done your letter is for the GDC staff to put the bundle together and give it to the case examiners. And the case examiners, when they get the case, turn it around pretty quickly. Deal with quite quickly by doing an end-to-end process review and work out what the problem is. And they keep trying and they keep changing it, and it's getting worse. Even though the number of complaints is steady at about 1,200 a year, and of which they're investigating, I don't know, 60%. So,
and Stephen, is that new process that you touched on before about complaints as well? What's that done for that 60% figure? Has it helped?
No, because those cases will be closed anyway, but they're being looked at quickly, so the registrants put at ease quickly.
Okay.
So the decision making is the same, but it's just being put into a different sausage machine. So they get to the decision point quicker. And where they're being investigated formally, then the sausage machine is just rolling on. And it doesn't seem that anyone has oversight of that. I asked myself, and you'll have seen in the blogs, I asked myself what the non-executive directors of the GDC are doing to put the executive under pressure to sort that out. Because if, it takes 9 months from a referral to a hearing, because you have to have time to do that. So 9 months is okay, because the GDC gets 4 months, then the practitioner gets 4 months to prepare a defence. So 9 months is fine. It's the bit leading up to the first decision by the case examiners, that's where the problem is. And no amount of shouting at them is making a blind bit of difference.
And it's worrying, isn't it? Because you use the language which is perfectly accurate, it being an admin problem. But what the impact of that admin problem on the registrant is, or can be, pretty horrendous.
It's well known in the literature that people who are under investigation make more mistakes. So if you have the GDC looking over your shoulder, although it may not be in your conscious all the time, subconsciously, it is a very, very disruptive process to be involved with. It impacts people's personal life, it impacts their professional life within the practice, and it impacts their decision making when they're considering choices of treatment plans for patients. So, there are some people who happily, it's a very, very small number, whose mental health is so damaged by these investigations that they either give up back in dentistry, or in a very small number of people, tragically end their life. Now, it's rare, I think, for a GDC investigation to be the beginning, the middle, and the end of any suicide story. But it may often be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And it's the cumulative angst of something that's going on for years that is unbearable for people. And I've seen people in a lot of trouble, a lot of trouble because of the stress of an investigation. I mean, happily, there are organizations that can help. Each of the defense organizations have a counseling service that they can offer to members. And the one organization I would mention to all dentists is NHS Practitioner Health. And NHS Practitioner Health is set up to deal with doctors and dentists who have a health problem, excuse me, a health problem that either is their own health problem, it might be an addiction, it might be a dependence, it might be a mental health problem, it might be entirely caused by a regulatory investigation or an NHS investigation. But the feedback I've had from people, and I've seen from people, is that NHS Practitioner Health are superb because they get it. They understand that the doctors who are helping people understand what they're being told, and they get it. So they empathize, and they've got practical solutions. So a big shout out for NHS Practitioner Health. So if anyone's in trouble, whether it's with local NHS team, the GDC, or a trust, whatever, and you're struggling, please contact NHS Practitioner Health. They're on the website, and I'm sure we can put a link in the chat at the end of this.
Absolutely, and I think in you see already, Stephen, I'm thinking actually it was going to be a fairly short, sharp conversation, and actually we're kind of well into it. And I'm thinking I'm only scratching the surface of this. So I think I'll probably use that as an opportunity to bring this particular conversation to an end, and because that's a very positive, practical message about NHS practitioner health. And I think that's right. And I think the gist of it in terms of what should be looked at from the GDC point of view is not necessarily the component parts of the process, but the speed of execution of all of those. And that's what we need to see changed. Well, like I say, Stephen, I found it absolutely fascinating, and I honestly could go on for ages with this, because I think it's such an important topic. And I mean, there's a whole bit of me that wants to go and explore that idea that people under investigation make more mistakes, and the GDC's remit is to protect the public. So actually having a process that prompts more mistakes and puts the public at risk just seems so counterintuitive. But I think for now I'll just say thank you so much for your time. It's been so interesting talking to you, and I very much hope we can do this on a regular basis, because I think there's lots of really helpful insights that you're being able to give to the people listening to the podcast.
Thanks, Nigel. It's an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed.